Beneath the veneer of conventional self-help lies a confidence technique so powerful yet morally ambiguous that it's rarely discussed in polite society. Niccolò Machiavelli, writing from the brutal political landscape of Renaissance Italy, encoded this psychological hack within The Prince, a manuscript so controversial it wasn't published until after his death. This documentary exposes the dangerous confidence technique that Machiavelli discovered by observing history's most effective rulers, the strategic separation of appearance from reality. Unlike the empty, fake-it-till-you-make-it platitudes of modern advice, Machiavelli's approach involves a sophisticated understanding of perception management that instantly transforms how others respond to you. This isn't merely about projecting confidence, it's about architecting it through calculated impression engineering that bypasses others' rational defenses. From Renaissance courts to modern boardrooms, this technique has remained the closely guarded secret of those who understand that true power comes not from what you are, but what others perceive you to be. If you're ready to discover the confidence hack that powerful figures have always known but never shared, hit subscribe now to unlock this dangerous knowledge that permanently alters how you navigate every human interaction. In the crowded marketplace of modern American self-help, confidence advice has become a billion-dollar industry built on a fundamental deception. Believe in yourself. Stand tall. Maintain eye contact. These superficial tactics treat confidence as an internal state to be achieved rather than what Machiavelli recognized it truly is, a strategic perception to be engineered in the minds of others. This distinction isn't merely academic. Neuroscience research from Stanford University reveals that what we perceive as confidence in others isn't their internal emotional state, but rather a specific set of behavioral signals that trigger automatic respect responses in the human brain. EEG studies show that witnessing confident behavior activates the same neural pathways as encountering high-status individuals, regardless of their actual competence or authority. The implications are profound. Dr. Cameron Anderson's research at UC Berkeley demonstrates that confident individuals receive 68% more respect and recognition than their equally competent but less confident peers. More disturbing is his finding that confident incompetence is rewarded more highly than humble competence across nearly all professional domains. The correlation between actual ability and professional success hovers around 0.2, while the correlation between perceived confidence and success reaches 0. A pattern that holds even in highly technical fields. This creates what psychologists call the confidence paradox, the counterintuitive reality that appearing confident produces better results than actually being competent. As Stanford psychologist Dr. Emma Williams explains, we've identified that confidence operates primarily as a social signal rather than an internal state. The person who appears confident receives tangible advantages regardless of their actual ability or self-perception. Machiavelli observed this dynamic centuries before modern science could explain it. Studying the rise and fall of Renaissance rulers, he documented how those who carefully managed perception consistently outperformed those who relied on actual competence. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are, he wrote, not as a moral endorsement but as a clear-eyed recognition of how human perception actually functions. This insight becomes particularly valuable when we examine how confidence is judged in daily life. Princeton University researchers found that people make confidence assessments within the first 200 milliseconds of an interaction, far too quickly for rational evaluation. These snap judgments then create what psychologists call confirmation bias, where subsequent information is filtered to confirm the initial impression. The person initially perceived as confident receives the benefit of the doubt when they make mistakes, while the person initially perceived as uncertain faces increased scrutiny even when performing well. Corporate America has institutionalized this insight. Executive coach Margaret Neal, who charges Fortune 500 companies $15,000 per day for leadership training, focuses not on developing actual confidence, but rather on what she calls confidence signaling, specific behavioral patterns that trigger automatic respect responses. Internal states are irrelevant to outcomes, Neal explains. What matters is the confidence perception you create in others' minds. This approach explains why certain confidence-building techniques consistently fail. Traditional advice focuses on changing how you feel rather than how others perceive you, addressing the wrong side of the equation. Breathing exercises, positive affirmations, and visualization techniques may temporarily boost subjective feelings, but do nothing to alter the behavioral signals others use to make confidence assessments. The technology industry provides perhaps the clearest example of perception management trumping reality. A Harvard Business School analysis of startup funding found that entrepreneurs rated highly on confidence markers received 4.2 times more venture capital than equally qualified counterparts, regardless of business plan quality or market conditions. This confidence premium represents millions of dollars in tangible advantage based entirely on perception rather than substance. The gender dimensions cannot be ignored. Yale University research demonstrates that women face what researchers call a confidence double-bind, penalized for appearing uncertain, yet also penalized for displaying the same confidence behaviors that reward men. This creates a narrow behavioral bandwidth where women must demonstrate confident warmth rather than simply confidence, a more complex performance requiring sophisticated understanding of perception management. What makes Machiavelli's insight particularly valuable is its focus on strategic implementation rather than moral judgment. Unlike modern self-help that frames confidence as a virtuous quality to develop, Machiavelli recognized it as a tactical tool to deploy, acknowledging the uncomfortable reality that perception management skills create tangible advantages, regardless of underlying substance. This perspective explains why conventional confidence advice consistently underperforms. Tips like stand tall and speak clearly treat confidence as a universal formula rather than a contextual performance. Machiavelli understood that effective confidence displays must be calibrated to specific audiences and situations. What impresses in one context appears arrogant or inauthentic in another. Former FBI behavioral analyst Joe Navarro applies this principle through what he calls contextual confidence mapping, identifying the specific confidence markers valued in particular environments. Wall Street trading floors reward aggressive confidence displays that would be disastrous in diplomatic contexts. Navarro explains, the confident person isn't the one who follows universal rules, but rather the one who correctly calibrates signals to audience expectations. This strategic approach transforms confidence from a personal quality into a tactical skill, something to be studied, practiced, and deployed with precision rather than vaguely pursued through generic advice. As we'll explore in the next chapter, Machiavelli's dangerous discovery wasn't simply that confidence matters, but rather that it can be systematically engineered through specific perception management techniques that bypass others' rational defenses. Imprisoned in a dank cell after the Medici family reclaimed power in Florence, Niccolò Machiavelli experienced firsthand the brutal reality of Renaissance politics. This personal devastation became the catalyst for his most dangerous discovery, one that would make The Prince so controversial it wasn't published until after his death. Through methodical observation of history's most effective rulers, Machiavelli identified what modern psychologists now call strategic perception management, the calculated engineering of others' impressions, independent of actual reality. This wasn't merely pragmatic advice, but a fundamental challenge to the moral frameworks of his time. While Renaissance Christian teachings emphasized authentic virtue, Machiavelli boldly declared, "It is unnecessary for a prince to have all the good qualities I have enumerated, but it is very necessary to appear to have them." This distinction between being and appearing became his most revolutionary insight, not because it was novel, but because he dared to articulate what powerful figures had always intuitively understood, but never openly acknowledged. Historian Quentin Skinner notes that Machiavelli's contemporaries found this perspective shocking, not because it was unknown, but because it violated the cardinal Renaissance virtue of sincerity. By suggesting that appearance matters more than reality, Skinner explains, Machiavelli challenged the entire moral foundation of Renaissance society, the belief that true nobility required internal virtue rather than external display. The historical context provided Machiavelli unique perspective. Observing how the Medici family maintained power through carefully orchestrated public appearances, while engaging in ruthless private actions, he documented what anthropologists now call dual operational systems, maintaining distinct public and private personas, specifically engineered for different purposes. Modern psychological research validates Machiavelli's observation. Stanford professor, Dr. Robert Cialdini's studies on influence demonstrate that human judgment relies primarily on peripheral cues rather than central processing. We respond to confidence signals automatically, rather than evaluating actual competence. This creates what Cialdini calls judgment shortcuts that can be strategically exploited through calculated impression management. The neurological basis for this vulnerability appears in what neuroscientists call thin slice judgments, our brain's tendency to make comprehensive evaluations based on minimal information. fMRI studies reveal that confidence displays trigger positive evaluation patterns in observers' brains within 200 milliseconds, far too quickly for rational assessment. Once established, these initial impressions create powerful confirmation bias that filters subsequent information. What made Machiavelli's insight particularly dangerous was its explicit rejection of authenticity as a virtue. While contemporary thought leaders still promote authentic confidence, Machiavelli recognized this as fundamentally misguided. In contexts where outcomes matter, strategic inauthenticity consistently outperforms genuine expression. As he wrote, "One who deceives will always find those who allow themselves to be deceived." This perspective has found modern scientific validation. Harvard psychologist Dr. Amy Cuddy's controversial research initially suggested that power posing could increase actual confidence through hormonal changes. However, subsequent studies revealed something more aligned with Machiavelli's insight. While power poses don't reliably change internal states, they dramatically alter how others perceive and respond to you. The confident appearance alone creates tangible advantages regardless of internal feelings. Corporate America has institutionalized this insight. Executive presence training, a $1.2 billion industry in the United States alone, focuses exclusively on perception management rather than actual leadership capability. As executive coach Sylvia Ann Hewlett explains, presence is about managing perceptions through deliberate behavioral choices rather than expressing authentic personality. This approach creates what organizational psychologists call perception arbitrage, exploiting the gap between appearance and reality for strategic advantage. The political landscape offers perhaps the clearest example of Machiavelli's principle in action. Campaign strategist James Carville notes that successful politicians master what he calls confidence transference, displaying absolute certainty regardless of private doubts. The appearance of conviction, Carville explains, is more persuasive than actual expertise on complex issues. This insight explains why confident simplicity consistently outperforms nuanced accuracy in political messaging. What makes Machiavelli's approach particularly effective is its focus on specific behavioral patterns that trigger automatic respect responses. Rather than vague advice to be confident, he identified precise actions that create perception advantages regardless of internal states. As he observed of successful rulers, nothing makes a prince so much esteemed as great enterprises and setting a fine example. The modern application of this principle appears in what psychologists call competence signaling, displaying specific behaviors that others unconsciously associate with capability. Executive coach Olivia Fox-Cabane trains clients in these signals, speaking more slowly, using fewer qualifiers, occupying physical space unapologetically, and maintaining longer eye contact. These behaviors trigger what neuroscientists call status recognition circuits that bypass rational evaluation entirely. Tech industry leaders have refined this approach to systematic precision. Former Google executive Shanna Negron teaches what she calls perception architecture, deliberately engineering others' impressions through controlled information release, strategic ambiguity, and contextual confidence displays. The goal isn't deception, Negron explains, but rather understanding that others form impressions through predictable psychological patterns that can be deliberately managed. What distinguishes Machiavelli's dangerous confidence hack from simplistic, fake-it-till-you-make-it advice is its sophisticated understanding of human perception mechanics. Rather than merely pretending confidence, his approach involves creating specific impression structures that automatically trigger respect responses in others' minds, engineering social reality rather than merely navigating it. Within The Prince, Machiavelli encoded a specific formula for engineering confidence perception, a structured approach to appearance management that transforms how others respond to you. This wasn't merely philosophical speculation, but practical technique derived from observing history's most effective power players across centuries of political maneuvering. The formula begins with what Machiavelli called the strategic separation, consciously dividing your internal experience from your external presentation. Unlike modern advice to be yourself, Machiavelli recognized that effective confidence displays require deliberate behavioral choices independent of actual feelings. This creates what psychologists now call performance authenticity, the ability to present as genuine while maintaining complete control over displayed behaviors. Corporate implementation of this principle appears in what executive coaches call compartmentalization training, teaching leaders to maintain consistent confidence displays regardless of internal doubts. Goldman Sachs includes this technique in their executive development program, with managing directors reporting that this single skill created the most significant improvement in their leadership effectiveness. The formula's second component involves what Machiavelli termed virtue signaling, strategically displaying behaviors associated with admirable qualities while minimizing contradictory evidence. It is not essential that a prince should have all the good qualities I have mentioned, but it is essential that he should seem to have them, he wrote, acknowledging the psychological reality that perception often matters more than substance. Modern marketing research validates this approach. Stanford business professor Dr. Jennifer Akers' studies on brand perception demonstrate that limited but consistent displays of specific attributes create stronger impressions than comprehensive but varied demonstrations. This signaling concentration effect explains why focused confidence displays in key moments create stronger perception advantages than consistent but diluted presentations. The formula's third element focuses on what Machiavelli called reputation architecture, systematically building perception through specific behavioral patterns rather than general impression management. This structured approach involves three distinct components: decisive action, controlled communication, and strategic unpredictability. Decisive action creates what psychologists call behavior-based confidence attribution. Others assume internal certainty based on external decisiveness, regardless of actual conviction. McKinsey research confirms this effect, finding that executives who make faster decisions are rated 38% higher on leadership capability than those who take more time, regardless of decision quality. This creates an actionable principle. Swift action creates confidence perception independent of actual results. Controlled communication involves what linguists call authority positioning, using specific language patterns that trigger automatic respect responses. These include speaking in declarative rather than qualifying statements, using shorter sentences with stronger verbs, eliminating unnecessary explanations, and employing strategic pauses. Linguistic analysis of Fortune 500 CEO speech patterns reveals that these specific communication choices correlate more strongly with perceived leadership than actual company performance. Strategic unpredictability creates what game theorists call psychological dominance, maintaining initiative through controlled behavioral variation. Machiavelli observed that the most effective rulers were sometimes merciful, sometimes cruel, as suited the occasion, not from temperamental inconsistency, but from calculated awareness of context. This approach prevents others from developing comfortable predictions about your behavior, creating what psychologists call attention capture, that maintains psychological advantage. What makes this formula particularly powerful is its neurological basis. Neuroscientist Dr. Antonio Damasio's research on decision-making demonstrates that humans form judgments primarily through emotional responses rather than rational evaluation. The confidence signals in Machiavelli's formula trigger what neuropsychologists call competence assumption circuits, brain patterns that automatically generate respect responses based on specific behavioral cues regardless of actual capability. The corporate world offers clear examples of this formula in action. When Satya Nadella took over as Microsoft CEO following Steve Ballmer's departure, he implemented what organizational psychologists call perception reframing, strategically displaying confidence signals, decisive restructuring, clear vision statements, calculated vulnerability, that created the impression of assured leadership during uncertain transition. This perception management approach was credited with restoring investor confidence before any actual performance improvements materialized. Political application of the formula appears in what campaign strategists call conviction engineering, displaying absolute certainty on simplified positions while maintaining private flexibility. Communication coach Dr. Nick Morgan, who trains political candidates, notes that Perceived conviction is neurologically more persuasive than actual expertise, creating a situation where confidence displays consistently outperform factual accuracy and public influence. The formula's modern implementation involves what psychologists call contextual calibration, adjusting confidence displays to specific environmental expectations. Different professional contexts reward different confidence signals. Law firms value verbal assertiveness. Creative agencies reward bold ideation. Financial institutions prioritize risk tolerance, and medical settings value calm decisiveness. This calibrated approach explains why universally applied confidence advice consistently fails. Effective perception management requires sophisticated audience assessment. What distinguishes Machiavelli's formula from manipulative deception is its focus on strategic impression management rather than outright falsehood. As corporate communication expert Dr. Jennifer Chapman explains, all social interaction involves impression management. The only question is whether you're doing it deliberately or haphazardly. The formula doesn't create fiction, but rather carefully curates perception through selective emphasis and strategic behavioral choices. The psychological mechanism that makes this approach effective is what researchers call the halo effect, our tendency to make comprehensive, positive evaluations based on limited positive attributes. By strategically displaying specific confidence signals, you trigger what neuroscientists call global positive assessment, a comprehensive, favorable judgment that extends far beyond the actual behaviors displayed. In today's world, Machiavelli's confidence hack has evolved from intuition to science. Modern masters don't rely on general charisma, but on calculated impression engineering based on psychological triggers that generate automatic respect responses. Corporate examples abound. Jack Welch at GE institutionalized what psychologists call confidence architecture, systematically engineering perception through specific behavioral patterns. While attributed to natural charisma, former executives reveal Welch meticulously planned everything from decisive meeting entrances to strategic displays of controlled emotion, calibrated for maximum impact. Steve Jobs mastered what psychologists call reality distortion fields, creating perception environments where his confidence displays altered how others perceived objective reality. As former Apple executive Ron Johnson explained, Jobs understood that conviction displayed with sufficient intensity rewires observers' perception. People began seeing products through his confidence rather than their own evaluation. The mechanism behind this effect is emotional contagion, our tendency to unconsciously adopt emotional states we witness. Neuroscience shows that observing confident behavior activates mirror neurons that generate similar states in observers, creating confidence transfer that bypasses rational assessment. The business advantage is measurable. Harvard Business School research shows companies led by CEOs rated highly on confidence markers receive valuation premiums averaging 7.4% over equally performing competitors, billions in market value generated through perception rather than performance. Modern application combines confidence with strategic vulnerability. Executive coach Olivia Fox-Cabane teaches controlled vulnerability, carefully calibrated disclosure that creates the appearance of transparency while strengthening perception advantage. Controlled vulnerability creates the impression of complete authenticity, she explains, which paradoxically enhances the impact of confidence displays. Implementing these insights requires 3 components: nonverbal signaling, verbal positioning, and strategic action patterns. Each demands specific techniques refined through practice until they become automatic rather than requiring conscious performance. Nonverbal signals include dominance markers, specific physical behaviors that trigger status recognition. Research from MIT confirms these behaviors: expanded body positioning, reduced self-touching movements, lowered vocal tone with decreased pace, maintained eye contact with reduced blinking, correlate more strongly with perceived authority than any verbal content. Verbal positioning involves authority framing, specific language patterns that create perception advantage. These include speaking in shorter declarative sentences rather than qualifiers, eliminating unnecessary explanations, using authoritative phraseology, "I've determined" rather than "I think," strategic silence after key points, and downward inflection, lowering tone at sentence end rather than raising it. Strategic action patterns include decisional confidence displays, making choices with less apparent deliberation, announcing decisions rather than discussing options, limiting revision of previous positions, and maintaining course despite obstacles. Wall Street executive Carla Harris calls this balancing performance currency versus relationship currency, strategically separating competence displays from relationship building. Context matters significantly. In corporate settings, executive presence requires decisive visibility, being strategically visible during key perception-shaping moments while maintaining selective distance that creates authority mystique. This calibrated approach creates stronger impression advantage than constant presence, which research shows diminishes perceived authority over time. In entrepreneurial contexts, venture capitalist Ben Horowitz describes the strongman strategy, displaying absolute conviction, despite uncertainty when raising capital. This approach exploits what economists call the certainty premium, investors' willingness to accept higher risk when presented with confident certainty rather than nuanced probability, consistently generating higher valuations independent of business fundamentals. What distinguishes effective implementation from transparent performance is internalization through practice, consistently applying these behaviors until they become automatic. As executive coach Marshall Goldsmith explains, the gap between deliberate behavior and automatic habit is where most confidence engineering fails. Effective perception management requires consistent application until these patterns become your default operating system. The ethical approach involves congruence development, gradually building actual capability to match confidence displays rather than maintaining permanent discrepancy. This creates what psychologists call earned authenticity, where strategic behaviors eventually align with internal reality, transforming performance into genuine embodiment. The ultimate achievement of Machiavelli's dangerous confidence hack isn't deceptive manipulation, but sophisticated understanding of how human perception functions. By recognizing that confidence operates primarily as a social signal rather than an internal state, you focus on strategically engineering how others perceive you, creating tangible advantages through calculated impression management rather than hoping for recognition of actual capability. As Machiavelli acknowledged, this approach involves uncomfortable recognition of how human psychology actually operates, rather than how we wish it would. The dangerous reality remains that perception management skills create concrete advantages regardless of underlying substance, explaining why confidence often outperforms competence across virtually all human domains.